Alright, putting the wheels on the frame. I'm going to start with the frame we made in the last video, and we're going to start by gluing some pieces on that are going to hold these laser cut wheels. So I'm going to cut a piece to fit across the front, and I'm going to glue that on. This raises it a little bit. This also helps to strengthen the frame a little bit. Then I'm going to want to cut two short pieces across the back. They're only going to be about as wide as the pieces on the back, but where I place them is critical. The large pulley has to kind of fit in the center. Notice that the center of the pulley is in the center of the wheels, and it has to have room to turn. So when you determine where that is, that's where you want to glue these two pieces on. Very important step here. It's critical that the front and the back axles are parallel. You noticed in the intro my car curves a little bit as it's driving, and that's just because I was just slightly off on the parallel in making the axles parallel. So I'm going to measure out a couple of lines for placement of the back axle. Then I'm going to measure a couple of dots off of that back axle and draw a line for the front. Okay. Very critical that we get those lines straight, and then when we cut these pieces of straw, that they align really well when we glue them on. So the first one I cut just a little bit wider than the front, and you'll notice if I stick the wooden dowel in for the wheel axle, it holds that pretty well. I'm putting a little bit of glue over the top of the straw. That kind of helps to lock it in. Okay. Then if I'm going to cut two short pieces of straw to go across to hold the back axle, and you notice I have them just a little bit longer so they stick out a little bit from the frame. Very important here to check that the axle spins nicely inside of that straw. If you don't have those straight, it can bind the axle. These little 3D printed plastic pieces are what are going to hold the axle straight and parallel and centered in the wheels. There are notches in the coupling that would line up with the little lines that are crisscrossed on the wheel. I stick a little hot glue in through the coupling. You'll notice I stick it out a bit further and then add more glue, and then that goes onto the wheel. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. Some are better than others. Through a little bit of practice, that seems to be the best way for me. That holds the wheel on pretty nicely. Now, measuring this and giving yourself enough dowel in order to do the same thing on the other side is pretty critical. So make sure you leave enough room to slide this on. And be careful not to get glue slagged up on the straw itself, or your wheels aren't going to turn very well. All right. Now for the back, we are going to actually glue two pieces of cardboard together, so the back wheels are a little wider than the front, just to make it look a little bit souped up here. And I'm sorry I didn't realize my hands were not on camera when I was doing this, but if you put the axles through the couplings and then glue that onto the wheel, it's the same process that we used for the front wheels. We'll start with one side, leaving the axle long, so that we can have room to put the axle through the straws, align the pulley, and then get the other wheel in place. Okay, it's critical in this step that you remember to add the rubber band around the pulley before you add the second wheel. You want to make sure that you have the pulley and the rubber band on the axle before the second wheel is glued on. So there I am adding the rubber band. Make sure that you're adding one of the smaller rubber bands. If there's a bigger rubber band in your kit, that is to hold the battery. Use the small rubber band. We're going to add a small amount of glue to the edge of the pulley to glue it onto the axle, but you want to be careful not to get it stuck in the straws. Keeping that free and clear of the straws will determine just how well your wheel is spinning inside of the straws. So we're going to cut off the axle using the same process as we use for the front wheels. We're going to cut it long enough to have room to stick out from the straw through the axle coupling and then into the wheel just a little bit. It's the same process. We're gluing the coupling onto the wheel, carefully adding that onto the axle. I spin it on a little bit just to get the glue into the connection a little bit. You should be good to move on.